In this episode, we'll take a look at the OSEE G7 7-inch monitor with 3000 nits brightness. When I think about filmmaking gear, I think of the gear in kind of three different tiers. There's the budget gear, there's the mid-tier gear, and there's, of course, the professional level gear. What I often find, for example, in the case of monitors, is that you're going to see things that are very budget-oriented. They're very much priced for the enthusiast market where people are self-funding for their films. The mid-tier is kind of a step up from that. It'll typically have more features. And if you're thinking about it in the lighting world, I think a lot of the newer aperture lights, for example, kind of fit into this mid-tier as well. And that's where the OSEE G7 falls as well. So it's more expensive than a lot of the other monitors we have reviewed in the past, including the Feelworld LUT7S and the Portkeys HS7T. So the question is for this additional price, which is substantial, what do you get? So first of all, this is a 7-inch 1920 by 1200 8-bit panel, and we're talking about a max brightness of 3000 nits. This is the brightest monitor I have ever seen. And of course, the benefit of that is that when you're out in the full sun, it's a lot easier to see the screen. The viewing angle is spec'd at 160 degrees, and just from my practical subjective assessment, definitely looks like 160 degrees or thereabouts. In terms of contrast ratio, it's 1200 to 1 native. It has both HDMI and 3G SDI inputs and outputs, so you can connect to pretty much any camera. And in terms of the overall latency, we did some testing here. With SDI, you typically will see less latency than you will with HDMI. On this particular monitor, it was about the same. Both, what I would say, relatively low latency, both usable for focus pulling if you're doing narrative and dramas and things of that nature. If you're going to be doing a lot of action and you need to focus pull from the monitor, you might want to look at another monitor. In terms of the frame rates that this can handle, so you can actually input a 4K signal via HDMI, and you can input an HD signal via SDI. And then this is where it maxes out in terms of overall frame rates. It would be nice to see it to support higher frame rates as well. So when you're shooting 60 frames per second, for example, it'd be nice if it could actually receive that and monitor that as well. Now, it does have loop outs, so if you want to connect another monitor downstream, either via HDMI, you can do that, or SDI. It does not cross-convert, however, so you need to keep that in mind. So if you plug in a source from HDMI, you cannot output SDI or vice versa. One of the things I really appreciate about the G7 is all the different powering options. So you do have an NPF battery sled on the back, and with an NPF 970, you can power for about 3 hours at full brightness. And of course, if you drop it down from full brightness, which is typically where I'm using it, probably not even at half, I often have it just set at 3 out of 10. And in that case, you can get substantially longer than 3 hours. Now, it also comes with a V-mount battery plate that you can mount on the back of the monitor, or it comes with a cable so you can just connect to your cinema camera's battery if you're using any sort of V-mount or Anton Bauer Gold mount battery. Also, it comes with an AC adapter, so if you are going to be working in studio and you have access to AC, you can power all day long with AC. So this is a great example of how the OSEE is better equipped just right out of the box to power via a lot of different sources, whereas the more budget-oriented monitors, in some cases they can power via those other sources, but it's up to you to go buy the cable on your own or the battery plate on your own as well. So kind of one of those differences here where you're seeing a higher price kind of gets you started faster and easier. Now, one thing that some people will be disappointed about, but for me is actually a plus, it is not a touchscreen monitor. So you're not going to have all those fingerprints all over your screen. That's the positive side. And it does use this really kind of unique single joystick control to basically control everything. The only other control there is on the entire unit is a power switch, which is literally a power switch on the back, a slide switch, which is also nicer than a lot of the push buttons, because when you turn it off, it doesn't continue to drain your battery like a lot of the other less expensive monitors do. Now, this joystick is interesting because that is how you control the whole thing. And what's really unique about the OSEE G7 is that you kind of operate it at a practical level in a different way. You set up scenes, and in each of those scenes, you can include whatever type of tool you want to, whether that be false color, waveforms, vector scopes, all of these different tools you can use. And then you can just switch between scenes very quickly with the joystick while you're shooting. So it makes getting the tools on screen that you need for any particular moment in time I think, a lot easier. Now, a lot of the other more budget-oriented monitors will have basically 3, maybe 4 different kind of custom keys that will allow you to bring up individual tools. And that's nice, but this works even better than that from my point of view, because you can really customize it and get it set up exactly how you want it. You can move the tools around to different spots on the screen, which is nice as well, depending on your particular shot. And it just gives you a lot more flexibility. This is an example of where you're starting to get more pro-level features. So let's talk about what those exposure tools are. For example, you do, of course, have false color, and it has its own sort of unique false color they call super false color. But then it also has false color that's optimized for various cinema cameras out there. So you can really dial this in for your particular camera. Of course, you have a vector scope. So if you're trying to set white balance, I find that really helpful in just making sure that your skin tones are where you want them. Here's a nice thing as well. You have both RGB and Luma waveforms. So whichever one you prefer, you can use that to help you get your exposure spot on. And of course, you also have zebras and a histogram. The focus assist and the focus peaking is very customizable, so you can really kind of fine-tune it for your particular camera. And it also has a black and white background option, which makes it even easier to really see what you're doing and really nail focus. So if you're going to use this as a focus pulling monitor, some nice features on that front. There is also an image resize, so if you want to make a little more room for some of your tools without overlaying them on top of the image, you can do that. And then you also have a zoom and pan feature where you can zoom in at 2 times or 4 times and then pan around the image to really make sure you've got things where you want them. A lot of the budget monitors do not have battery status indicators. And the nice thing here on the G7 is it not only does it have a battery status indicator, but it tells you the voltage of your battery at the current time. So once you get to understand your particular batteries, you'll know what voltage they shut down, and you'll know exactly where you are. In terms of color quality, seems to match the cameras that I've used it with. I've got a Pocket 6K I've used it with, a Canon C200 I've used it with, Pocket 4K, and Panasonic GH5s. Seems to match all of them, so it looks like it's been calibrated to Rec. 709 straight out of the factory. It does come with 33 different log to Rec. 709 LUTs for various cinema cameras out there, and if yours isn't represented or you want to upload a custom LUT, you can also upload up to 16 different LUTs into the monitor to really kind of dial in the look you're going for, so lots of options there as well. It can also do anamorphic D-squeeze at 1.33, 1.5, 1.66, 2.0, and 2.0 magnified. It has a headphone jack with a control for the volume as well as a speaker, so you have a couple of different options there. So when you're playing back to maybe a group, instead of just having the audio play through headphones, you can actually also play it on a little speaker. Here's another thing that's really pretty unique about this monitor relative to a lot of the less expensive options. It appears to have an inbuilt accelerometer, which enables 2 different things. Number 1, if you orient the monitor upside down, it will automatically flip the image for you. And secondly, it also has a camera level in it. So it will help you adjust the bowl on your camera if you need to get everything leveled up. Really nice feature. In terms of build, here's the size. The weight is 450 grams. It's a step up from a lot of the budget monitors as well. Now, while the case is still polycarbonate, a plastic, it does have an aluminum frame, and the 1/4-20 mounts are attached to that frame inside. So you can actually attach it to cameras with some confidence that you're not going to break it off very easily. So it's a really sturdy feel. It doesn't flex like a lot of the other less expensive monitors do. Really inspires confidence. The 1/4-20 attachment points are on the top and the bottom. Another feature that's very unique about this one relative to almost all of the budget monitors that I've used is almost all the budget monitors have the ports on the bottom or the sides of the monitor. And that becomes a little bit of a problem when you're attaching it to your camera rig, in my experience for the most part. So what I like about this is that those attachment points, the SDI in and out and the HDMI in and outs, are on the back of the monitor. That's going to vary on how you have things rigged up on your particular rig, but for me, having those on the back works a lot better than having them on the bottom, which is where a lot of monitors put them. Now, the kit also includes a number of different things. There's a friction arm included. It does include the sun hood. The sun hood is actually quite nice too. It goes on very easily with basically these elastic straps that make it very quick and easy to get it on or off. As I mentioned before, it does come with a V-mount battery plate that you attach to the back over the NPF battery plate. So that's a pretty nice feature. It does also come with a D-tap to locking DC barrel cable, locking DC barrel, which is nice. So that's not going to pull out. The AC adapter, and it also has a hard case with internal padding. So transporting it to and from set or location is pretty nice too. It's protected. Now, in terms of price, this is where things are different than the budget monitors, obviously, and yet they're still not as expensive as a lot of the Pro monitors. So the G7 comes in at $722 US at the current time of this review, and there is also a T7 version. T7 is the same thing except only has HDMI in and out and no SDI, and that comes in at $428 US at the time of the review. Now, one of the things I think we're going to get questions on is how does this compare to the Feelworld LUT 7S? I did a review of that. If you're curious on all the details, I'll put a link to that up here. But overall, I would say the only thing that the LUT 7S has going for it that's better than the OSEE G7 is that its SDI latency seems to be a little bit lower. On every other front, the OSEE G7 is superior, and in some places, vastly superior. The G7 definitely has more flexibility on which tools you can have on screen, where they are on screen, an easier UI to use, brighter by 800 nits, and again, the build quality is substantially better. Also, the OSEE comes with basically everything you're going to need for your monitor, so that's not true of the LUT 7S. On the other hand, the LUT 7S is approximately one half the price of the G7, so that's the big trade-off. Also, a while back, we reviewed the Portkeys HS7T, which is also a budget 7-inch monitor. The G7 is superior in every single way to that monitor, and that also is a reflection of the price. So the HS7T is less than half the price of the G7, and I would say that, again, everything is superior in terms of the exposure tools, where you can place them, the controls are better. The HS7T, which is the monitor I've probably been using the longest, probably for the last 2 years or so, it has a roller dial on top for the menu, which is really kind of fiddly and overly sensitive, so it's sometimes hard to actually select what you're trying to select. Things of that nature, just little things. And that's where the G7 is vastly superior. Of course, the G7 also has almost 3 times the overall brightness, and it comes with all these different things that the HS7T doesn't come with, including the hard case, V-mount battery plate, and so on. So I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.